So I'd love for you to tell our guests a little bit about you, like a little bit about your company, maybe a little bit about your journey into the position you're in today. I'd love for my listeners to know that.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be happy to do so. So my name is Jancarlo Durand, and I started in IT really installing cables and fiber. I mean, I really started from the basic infrastructure that, today we all take for granted. And from that point on, I cover the help desk. I cover IT support. I had roles in systems administrators. And from that point on, I cover an IT architect role, then IT manager, and today I'm an IT director at MedSource. MedSource is a clinical research organization that focuses on oncology studies, CNS studies, and rare diseases.
Down in the North Carolina, Raleigh area, right?
That is correct.
It's a heavy concentration of of companies in the pharmaceuticals, healthcare industry down in your area.
Yeah, absolutely. You have plenty of opportunity in that realm around the RDU area for sure.
So let's talk about some of the what you. I love this 100-day challenge that I launched right before the plague and the pandemic hit. Right around that time, I thought, we've got to start thinking about how do we lead in times of disruption, and this disruption nobody was anticipating. And so I love, and we were talking about this a little bit. What does the next 100 days look like, do you think, as people come back to work, and what do you think your role is as a leader?
Well, that's an excellent question, Bill. I was thinking about kind of like that situation. I mean, what's going to be next after we come back to work? For instance, how would meetings are going to be held? I mean, usually when you have those meetings, you present your personality, your charisma, you have a presence, kind of like your shadow, if you will.
Sure.
And assuming that we're going to come back with certain restrictions like a mask, how would that going to play out? How are you going to be able to express your either emotions or opinion almost with a blank face, because you are really covering the most expressing part of your body, which is, this part of your face. So in terms of that, I was thinking, how would those meetings going to be held? Or potentially are the meetings going to be just going to be held online? And if we were to take that approach and just keep those meetings online, how would those soft skills have to be improved to influence
Sure.
other business partners or other stakeholders? You are having to develop different skills that you didn't have to do in the past. I mean, of course, we all have had online meetings in the past, but I don't think they were as recurrent as they are today. I mean, we're even getting online meetings using Zoom or GoToMeeting with family members, and you're connecting with family members or friends. But going back to the work portion is like, how do you really impact and influence all those business partners on online meetings if that's what the new or the new norm is going to be? You're not going to have that.
That's a great question. That's a great question. How do you influence? I didn't really think about it from that angle, but how do you influence moving forward when you don't have the physical? You can't read body language as much. Movement patterns, eyes. It's just a little bit more challenging to be in this dimension that we're in. And virtual reality is not here yet. That might be a solution. A little VR headset, and then all of a sudden, boom, we've eliminated that problem.
That's right. We're bringing back Second Life, huh?
Exactly. So I think there's there's possibilities here that we're not even thinking about. But it's a good point. I my mother is a therapist, and she's an older therapist, as you might imagine, because I'm old. And she's like trying to figure out how to navigate the technologies. And she's like, I've turned it on, it works. She goes, but I'm exhausted. She's exhausted. I know that's shared not just with her, and not because she's older, but it's your concentration level is different. You're like, to read and understand and influence, it's just you're using the brain is just not ready for it yet.
Yeah, but also if we go back to that sort of video meetings that we potentially will have to hold for a long time, it's like, if you think about leading a team, how do you actually motivate and make your presence be present, if, for the lack of a better word, with your teammates or your direct reports? I mean, how do you actually can pass that on into others and keep the machine going? And how do you even stay motivated in your role as well? I mean, we, at the end of the day, are kind of in our little seat here at home. And we, of course, have our own motivations and goals. But how do you keep that going when, the check-ins that you may have with, different parts of the organization or different folks is virtual? It is different. I mean, there is an aspect that I think you will have to consider in terms of, it may not work for everyone necessarily, as you were describing your mother. I mean, it's exhausting. And, in an organization, we may have folks in different stages of their life, and they would have defined preferences as well. And that's something that, you also have to foster and try to be inclusive in terms of that, so you can keep the business going in the way it's always been.
Yeah, it's so is your are you anticipating these conversations, or have you talked to any of your peers about how they're going to be rolling out internal meetings, in how they plan on having 100, 200 people in a building? How do you is there strategies that have been discussed so far?
We have started touching on some of those aspects. I mean, we know that we're going to have a quite large checklist in order to allow our folks back into an office. I mean, there are certainly concerns that go across the board, but one of them, of course, is the one that you just pointed out, and will be something we will have to flesh out.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think this is in talking about presence, what does it mean to be present and impactful as a leader in a virtual? I've actually seen some training sessions where they've like, how do you lead your team and through this type of technology, and what are the strategies of leadership? And I think it really forces the question, how do you even define accountability?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, what does it mean to be accountable for your job? Like, how do you know that at 5 o'clock you've actually done a good job for the day? And it really defines at a top level. Are you being clear enough with your people such that they actually know what the heck they need to do by the 5 o'clock? So yeah, it forces clarity.
It does. And, it forces you to be a lot more clear than probably you've ever been, even in an email, or, we at MedSource use Microsoft Teams for our internal chat system. And it forces you to develop a higher level, not only of etiquette, but, way of expressing things that you cannot express for the lack of being in the same building. But it forces you to express the things that you need in a higher clarity level, if you will.
This whole thing for me has demolished the concept of delegation.
How so?
And I mean that because I am so glad this happened, because it's given me the opportunity to stop sprinting at full speed and actually look at what I've asked to be done. And just because I have a body in a chair doesn't mean it's being done. It just means I have a body in a chair. And that doesn't mean they're clear. It doesn't mean that I've been clear. It doesn't mean that I'm leading.
Mm-hmm.
So it's put full accountability on me. And then I can do a full audit on literally every person that's in my ecosystem and everything that's come out of my big fat mouth for the past year, 2 years, 3 years, they've asked to be done, to me, it's my fault. If there is something wrong, it's my fault. But I love this opportunity to sit, and I love how do you influence, these are really important questions. Like, how do I influence? And, am I being clear about what I've asked to be done so that I can be influential in the process? These are really powerful questions.
Yeah, and on the same hand, during this time, you're mentioning that you went from sprinting to taking a little more time to really reassess and reanalyze some of the things that you had in place. And for me, it's been like a really great time to actually work on new solutions. And because of the time or it almost felt like I had additional time, to be honest, being here at home. I mean, there were some of those
you know why nobody's asking you for dumb meetings.
That's right.
Talk about clarity, like I'm talking 360-degree clarity. Like, John, I mean, how many times did you spend a week you're like, why was I just in that meeting?
Well, I think I just had that time to focus, not only for 15 minutes at a time or 30 minutes at a time. It was more like 2 hours at a time where I could really pour myself into a very specific task, trying to resolve challenges that came up given COVID-19. So I was just able to really release a couple solutions in a span of a month, which I think it would have taken me at least 6 months or 8 months in a regular standard week or day.
That's great. I mean, but distraction is a big deal when you're sprinting, and the higher you rise up that leadership ladder, if you don't put, like, I just noticed for myself, if you don't have strong guardrails around the time, all of a sudden focus that got you to the level you're at, and this is anybody, not just you, but anyone, and myself included, that superpower gets diminished. Just like kryptonite. There is kryptonite around us. Like, if you can't focus, it impacts us as a leader. It's like, kryptonite does exist. It's a real thing.
No, that's a good point. I mean, superpowers, you take a step back and consider what took you to the place where you are today. And it's an interesting way of not only reminiscing how things were before, but also, what are your core competencies? I mean, how are you successful at doing what you do? And then, surprisingly, it's not necessarily that skill that it's sometimes missing. Is just that time or the time to focus on that. And that's what I've kind of rediscovered in a way. Now that I have a little more time to focus, I feel like I'm more effective, and not only as personal opinions, but based on an actual deliverable or deliverables that I've seen coming through from my end.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like in the time, I often said the time fits the space allotted, and if nobody's bothering you, you can actually sink into deep concentration. And nothing was ever accomplished, nothing serious and nothing significant has ever been accomplished without concentration. And in an ADD world with the phones going off and people would drive by meetings and ping this and just do not disturb, it takes extraordinary, I believe it takes extraordinary self-leadership. And I know that's one of the biggest things that I've discovered as well, is that when I can actually settle down and concentrate, you can actually get it's actually, if you actually thought about this, this is even weirder. Do you realize how hard it is to work an 8-hour day?
Yeah, it is tough.
I mean, 8 solid hours of just productivity. I know in my company, I may be getting I meant 4, 6 hours, and precious few people are able to produce 8. It's just, there's so many distractions. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really challenging. And I've actually tracked myself a couple times, like literally in every 15-minute block, and tried to do that for 8 hours. And at the end of the day, I'm like, woof, it's really difficult to rack up 8.
Yes, when you start looking at the time, at the 8-hour days, sometimes now they feel so long, but at the same time, in my case, I feel that they just go by so quick, just because I have the time to really focus
Yeah.
deeply on different tasks that I have to cover, that I'm like, oh my God, it's lunchtime already.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, I haven't even had lunch. It's 2. It has happened more than once, or a handful of times really, where I've been just so focused on a task that the time just went by so quickly. And the 8-hour days are completely out the window. Sometimes you have a 10, 11-hour day and you haven't even realized it. I mean, you just wake up early, you don't have to deal with traffic. Again, you go and eat lunch,
Yes.
maybe with your partner, with your husband, wife, you name it. And sometimes, they are as busy as you are. So you're just eating here in front of your computer and
Yep.
keep doing work. And you don't even realize it because it's almost part of your routine now. I don't think that's necessarily advisable, but it kind of like everything stuck together in a way, especially having restrictions and things of that nature. And in my case, having a newborn, I'm like, I don't even want to leave the house.
Yeah. Well, it's rediscovering purpose, I think, is it's another thing. It's like when people aren't distracted, they can actually settle into what their purpose is and find more, their higher level thinking and more satisfaction that way. It's really interesting, and we're going to discover a lot. A year looking back on this, we're going to look back on it very differently, aren't we?
Absolutely. I really think that, a year, maybe 2 years after all this clears out, we are going to go back to it and start understanding what are the things that we did right, what are the things that we did wrong, what are the things that improved in our organization, what are the advantages that we were able to take during this time. I don't think everything is negative. I think there are plenty of positives as well that have been discovered and have been implemented in our case. So I think even with the coronavirus being such a bad thing to have happen, I think it has pushed us as a society and as business partners to rediscover and discover new approaches to solve problems that we had in front of us for a long time.
Excellent. And I know you can't talk about it, but I know some of these process improvements are really going to bring a strategic advantage to your business coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of our processes had to be tweaked and rethought through, just because the way our business model is. There are many of the processes that usually take place in a presential base, and some of those had to be redesigned and reoffered in order to mitigate the challenges that we were facing.
Excellent. And what role did you play in that? Were you a key role in that?
Absolutely, yes.
See, there's never been a greater time to be at your level. There's never been a better time to be, a digital IT leader in an organization. I mean, it's crazy to think about it, but with the lightest touch, the technology leader touches every part of a business.
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, the solutions that we were able to provide were not only procedural, if you will. They had a component that had to address the procedure itself, that we had to complete a specific task. But on the back end, in order to run these new tasks, we were using a technology component to actually address it. And yeah, I would love to give you more details about it.
No, that's fine. My translation is give top flight people time to concentrate, cordon them off, and the tech leaders will transform your business. That's my translation.
I like it.
Well, Jancarlo, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This is going to be a fun interview for people to listen and watch, and something that you can be proud of, and that people listening can get quite a lot of value from.
Absolutely, Bill. Thanks again for your time. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I do appreciate it.
All righty.
Talk to you soon, Jancarlo.
All right. Bye.
Bye.